So I saw 28 Years Later in theaters. Now I was really excited for this movie. I loved the original 28 Days Later. I thought that was a great zombie movie, and at the time a really fresh new take on the zombie genre. And it's just one of those movies that I love and go back and watch again and again. 28 Weeks Later, I thought that was okay. The second one, but it just kind of felt like a generic zombie movie to me. But I was really excited for this based on the fact that I love that original one. And you had, I believe, the writer of the original come back, and you had the director Danny Boyle, I think his name, the director who directed the 28 Days Later, the original movie. So you had the same creative team, and I thought the trailers for this was fantastic. Like, this movie has some of the best trailers. Now, when it comes to this movie, there are things I like about this movie, but there's also some creative choices about this movie I wasn't a fan of. And you know what? I can totally see why this has like a sissy something percent audience score wise and has like I think in the 90s critic score, because this is definitely one of those movies I can see people loving extremely or hating extremely. I don't think there'll be too many people in the middle. And I'm somebody who's in the middle. Like I had a enjoyment enough time with it when I saw it, but the more I thought about it, it ended up in the okay range for me. And let me start with the positive of this movie. I do think the kid who plays the actor Alfred Williams who plays Spike, I actually really enjoyed his character, and I like the coming of age story element of this movie. I think I thought his character was great. I did actually feel invested in his character. I thought Aaron Taylor Johnson. I thought he was great too. I thought him and the kid who played Spike. I thought I bought the father and son relationship between them, and I think the actress who played Jodie Corner as Spike's mother, who's sick in the movie, character. I thought she gave a great performance in this movie too. Like acting wise, I thought all three of them. Oh, and also see here. What Ralph Fiennes as this doctor character. I actually like this character too. I thought he was great in this movie too, performance wise. So I thought all four of them were great performance wise in this movie. I liked their characters, and I think like how to affect it, looking at how they evolved. Like you see these two different kinds of effectors. Ones that are chubby. I thought that I thought that looked cool, and you see the alpha ones with. I like the look of them. One of the negatives about the alpha one in this is that I wish they kind of explored that idea more. Like I know Zack Snyder's Army of Dead kind of already did that element with the alpha thing, and I think that was better explored in that movie. And that movie I think is decent. Like I don't love it. I have an enjoyment of time with that movie, but it's not like a great zombie movie by any means. But I think the alpha idea was explored more in that movie. And this is not really fussed out. But I do like the idea of like the zombies have evolved. I like the whole idea of you see the community at the beginning as kind of like they have this whole community now when this is like 28 years later in this world after the first two movies. So I like you see it's like a community now, and you've kind of learned how to like live with the affected. So I like that element of the story, and I think there are some emotional moments towards the end with Spike and his mom, which I liked. I think the one of the pawns with that whole storyline. I'm going to get into the negatives with this movie, but I think that would have hit me harder, and I'm going to explain why. But there was some nice emotional moments between those two characters. So I think it has a good setup. I think all the acting is great from all four of those actors. There's some interesting ideas of these zombies have evolved in these two different ones, with the chubby ones that are like dragging themselves on the ground, and the alpha ones. So there's some interesting ideas there, and coming back to this world and seeing how they have this community now and are living with the affected people. And there's some interesting visuals in this movie with the whole. I know they use they use a couple of iPhones and strapped it on like I think from what I heard they used some iPhones and like try to have kind of like that, because the original movie I believe was like it had like a gritty, grimy feel. The original movie with how it looked, and I feel like they tried to capture the same vibe, but it just didn't work as well. And there's at times this movie does look cheap with the whole using the iPhones on the camera, and but they do. I'll give them credit. They do try some creative things with the way this movie is shot. Doesn't at times work for me really, but I'll give them credit. They are creative with the way this movie is shot. But the negatives with this movie is that this movie has a lot of tonal shifts. Oh, another positive with this movie is that there's later on Spike when he's trying to get his mom to see this doctor because she's sick. They run into the soldier, and there was some funny moments I thought with that, with his character and Spike, with the fact that Spike doesn't know stuff about the modern world, and because he's been in this community his whole life, he was born in this community. So there was some like that was probably the one portion of the movie that I did find some of the moments to be funny. And I like that soldier character, even though he gets, he's not in a huge chunk of the movie, but I liked his character, and I thought him and Spike had some funny moments. But the negatives with this movie is that there's a lot of tonal shifts in this movie. Like the first half is with him and his dad, which is a father and son story. Well, actually, the opening of this movie takes place at a church with this character named Jimmy, who you see older at the very end of the movie, which I'm talking about. That's going to be one of the big negatives with this movie. But you see, the movie actually opens with all these kids watching the Tubbies. I think I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but they're watching the kids show. The kids, and you see them watching the kids show, and then you hear them, and you see some kids die by affected people, and affected people killing the adults in the house, and you see this kid that lives, he goes to the church with this priest with, I don't know if that's, I'm not sure that was supposed to be his father. Let me know in the comments, because I was kind of unsure about that this priest was supposed to be his like father, but he's like all over the top and letting his zombies eat him to be taken to the rapture or something like that, and Jimmy survives, and you go back so it opens up with these kids, this character Jimmy who survives, and then it goes to Aaron Taylor Johnson and the main character Spike, who I will say this. They were marketing this as kind of like Aaron Taylor Johnson is the main character. He's really not. This movie is basically a coming story with Spike. He's the main character, which I like this character, so it didn't bother me too much, but it did kind of mismarket it a little bit, I thought, where Aaron Taylor Johnson is really not the main character of this movie. Like, you have the opening with this character Jimmy at this, with these kids, and then to the church, and then it jumps to Aaron Taylor Johnson, and Aaron Taylor Johnson and the actor who plays Spike, and becomes a father and son story, and then it like switches to a mother and son story of him trying to get her to see this doctor they were talking about, Ray Fiennes' character, and it feels like those like the switch over feels a little abrupt to me. It's like, and there's also times this movie's trying to be silly and like kind of sappy a little bit. Like there's a scene where Affected gives birth to a baby that's perfectly fine, which I think that was a little bit of my that felt like I had to suspend my disbelief a little bit there. Like the idea of this baby that's born from this affected woman, which to me they're zombies, which I don't think is unbelievable in the idea of, since you can say they're not zombies, they're just affected people with this virus and stuff, and the idea that they could have a baby, I guess, is possible with these versions of these zombies, but the baby being completely healthy and fine, I felt was a little. It did like I was felt like a little suspended my disbelief there, and the whole idea that she's like, I don't know, something about that moment just felt. I know they're trying to make it poetic because with Jodie's character. Jodie Corner's character as Spike's mother, and I get to try and make a movie between two women, having the idea of she understands because, it comes to whole births and babies with women. that moment did feel a little like, I don't know, it felt a little too sappy to me. And even stuff towards the end, I think there's some nice moments between him and his mom that I liked. I also think at times it felt a little sappy. So, and I think the other problem with Spike and his mother, that storyline, is that I think that would have hit me harder if you actually had this movie be about completely about him and his mother. Because, like I said, the openings with this shows with this kid Jimmy, who you see at the very end as an adult. Then you have a whole father and son story, and then Aaron Taylor Johnson just completely disappears from this movie when the kid takes his mother to go out after he sees that Aaron Taylor Johnson's character was cheating on her. And also the party scene earlier when they get away from the Alpha. Aaron Taylor Johnson and Spike when they get back to community. The whole party scene felt a little over the top to me. And that's what I mean by the tonal shifts in this movie. There's times where this movie is trying to be poetic. It's trying to be a drama. It's, you know, it's a little trying to be a little lighthearted and silly at times, and it just the tonal shifts I felt were like whiplashes in this movie. Like the Wisdom movie felt like it had a tone. Even when you get to the third act of the Wisdom movie, where it becomes about like humanity and the decay of humanity soldiers, you know, like trying to wake the two women in that movie, that still felt like tone-wise it fit with the movie. This movie takes a lot of tonal shifts, and I think at times it just feels like a whiplash to me. And like I said, you have like opening which is something else. You have one session with a father and son, and another session with the mother and the kid Spike. And I felt like that part of it would have hit me harder if you actually made this about Spike and his mother throughout the whole movie. And Aaron Taylor John's character, I do feel like it was weird. He just kind of like disappeared. You don't see him until like towards the end of the movie. I know it was some moments with I felt a little sappy. It was a little too much sappy for me. Where I was like I said, I think if they just had the mother be in this movie more, like you see at the beginning with stuff, like a little bit at the beginning with Spike and his father, but I felt like this would have hit me harder if you just made this about a mother and son. You know, having cancer I thought was, to me, predictable. I was like, I kind of saw that coming because when this, like, showing she's sick and she's at times, like, not forgetting stuff and not remembering, I was like, oh, well, she has cancer. You can tell she's, like, deteriorating and something's, you know, it's something, like, health-related. Like, I thought that was a little predictable, personally. And like the one moment where which I thought was a weird moment in the movie, where Spike's like falls asleep and one of those chubby zombies that drags himself on the floor, like starts eating his shoelace, and Spike wakes up and that zombie's dead. What affected is dead, and it shows a flash of his mother being the one that killed it. That came off a little silly to me. I was like, they don't really Spike doesn't like ask what like thinks weird what happened there. I also there was some like I said some ideas with the Alpha I think could have been a spoil mode. Like you see the moment where I'm assuming this is what the effect that was pregnant. You see that Alpha coming, he kills the soldier dude, Spike mother, they leave with the baby, and you see the Alpha like touch the affected pregnant woman that's dead, in like a way that's kind of like in a way that seems like they're making it that he was the father. But I feel like they just don't explore that idea enough. Like it's an interesting idea of like these affected people can have sex, they can have babies. I'm like, this is interesting, but they don't really explore it enough in this movie. It's like one moment in the movie, I felt like it could have explored that a little bit more because I was like, that could be interesting. They don't do enough dive enough into it. So that was another thing there. I felt like it could have explored that element a little bit more of the story. And White Fine's character, I like his character. He's not in this movie too much. Like towards the end, in the third act is where he's in the movie a lot, and I'm gonna assume he's being set up for he's gonna be in the second one more since it's already shot and coming out next year. I like this character. I think he added some nice levity, but I also felt like there was again some tonal shifts there when it comes to like him like when he stops the Alpha with these little dolphins that puts him to sleep. There was some like lightheartedness there that I felt a little out of place for me. Like I said, the tonal shifts just kind of like didn't always work for me in this movie. And like the way he takes out Spike's mother, where he like knocks Spike out. And I do like the fact Spike gets his last moment with his mother. I do. That part didn't completely work for me. Again, it's a little sappy, and I think if you just had this movie be about Spike and his mother through the whole movie and build that up more, I think that would just hit me harder. Because I like the idea of it. It's just I don't think they built it up enough for it to hit me as hard as I wanted it to. But I also thought it was kind of weird tonal shifts there, where he's like he takes his mother, she dies peacefully, and he gives her like skull to hang up on the. Which I think looks cool visually. I think the whole bones of skull. I think that looks really cool with the skull has. Visually, it looks cool. But I also thought again like a tonal shift there, where I was like, I don't. This comes off again for me a little silly. It's like one of those things where I'm like the tonal shifts at times in this movie just feel like whiplashes to me. Where I'm like, just really feel like it has a consistent tone in this movie. And this movie definitely, and look, it takes some swings. I don't think the swings always work in this movie for me personally. I can totally understand why it would for some people. Like this is one, like I said, this is one of those movies where if somebody said they love this movie, I would totally get it. You know, it takes a lot of swings, and I could see those swings working for you. But I could also see how some of the swings might not work for everybody. So that's why I'm kind of like in the okay ways with this movie, where I'm like there are things I like about it, but there's also swings it takes creatively that I'm not completely a fan of. And even with Spike's character, I like his character. I like the scene where at the beginning when they're shooting arrows, and then him and his dad are stopping at some point to shoot arrow, and it shows he's really scared and bad at it first. I do think he gets really better at it, kind of out of nowhere a little bit. Where I felt like that felt a little quick how he was able to get really good with the arrow, like the bow and arrow at the end there. And that's probably more of a nitpick, but that felt a little quick to me. But now when it comes to the ending, this is the thing everybody's talking about. Now let me say this. I did do my research on the ending of this movie afterwards, and I get what it means now. I still don't like the ending of this movie when you have like these you see the Jimmy kid that you saw in the opening of the chest. So he's all grown up, and you see him in his you see Spike running, and he's like trapped. He can't get anywhere. Like he's trapped, and he doesn't have anywhere to go. And you see up top the actor who's in Sinners, who played the vampire villain in that movie, so I thought he was great in that movie. He's playing the character Jimmy. You see him and his crew in like jumpsuits, colorful jumpsuits, and he's wearing like a little tiara on his head. And they jump off doing hardcore moves, and it just came off so silly to me. Like I did do my research afterwards about what it means, but I'm gonna be honest. Tonally, this is the biggest tonal shift to me. Where this is where it just where it really jumped the gun for me. I was like, this just feels so stupid. And I know people have been up. Well, you saw Spike with a power as a figure earlier. You saw Jimmy and other kids watching that kids show in the opening of the movie. But and like I said, I did the research where he's apparently playing some. I think it's some like famous person that he's like playing some character inspired by Jimmy something, some real person who like Jimmy, yeah, and he's like playing some like famous like person that actually was real called Jimmy something. And I did do research on it, like I said, but I just think this did not make me excited for the sequel. It just felt so like. And I've heard some people say maybe if you put the very end of this movie in like a post-credit scene, I do think that will work better. Because I just felt like to me it would just felt disjointed from this movie. It didn't fit in with this movie, and this just felt like one of those extremely big swings that was like this just felt out of place to me. Like people at the very end, seeing people with jumpsuits doing hardcore moves, flipping, and with colorful jumpsuits that look like Powies or something like that. I was like, This is stupid. This is silly. Again, I did the research. I understand. I read up on it, but I still think the van in this movie just doesn't look tonally wise. It just feels disjointed. It feels out of place in this movie. Again, if you made this a post-credit scene, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But it's just the tone for that scene just feels so like out of place in this movie. So overall, this is a movie that I think has interesting ideas. There's stuff I like when it comes to the acting. All four of those actors, they all do a great job. I like the character Spike. I like Aaron Taylor-Joy Scott Taylor Johnson's character. I like Jodie Comer's character. I like White Fine's character. They're all great acting wise. Also, like I said earlier, there's some creativity with how this movie's shot, but I also think it looks pretty cheap at times. And then here's another negative thing. I totally forgot about this. At the beginning of the movie, they do this a couple of times, so I'm not a fan of this. Where when they shoot the arrows through the affected people, they do this like freeze frame thing when they stop, like tone. I can't remember like it was to the left or right, but they tone like to the side and they stop, and it just looked really stupid to me. And they did it a couple of times. And I wasn't a fan of that creative choice. Again, they take some creative choices with the way this movie is shot, where it does feel like a experiment, and it just didn't work for me. And same with the editing of this movie. There's times where the editing like flashes from like history, from like old history with the editing of like flashes, and it just annoyed me a lot. It just felt like it took off, it like went in the pacing of the movie, and like throwing in these flashes of history at certain points with the editing in this movie, I was like, they're doing it too much. I don't mind if you do it like once or twice, but then they kept doing it, and I was like, this felt unnecessary. It doesn't add anything to this movie, and it just feels like this feels like Danny Boyle just being indulgent when it comes to how much he was doing in this movie. I was like, okay, this is just too much. It's like just, there's at times this movie I think is a little style over substance, and I think this movie just with the editing, with the flashes of like scene, they were flashing like scenes of history, and it just it didn't add to this movie, and just to me interrupted the flow of the movie, especially when you did it so much. So overall, 28 years later, like I said, I think this movie's fine. It's like I enjoyed it slightly more when I saw it in theaters, but the more I thought about this movie, it's just a very okay movie to me. It's like it's like with 28 Weeks Later for me, where they're both okay movies. They both have things I like, but they also have things I felt like the execution wasn't there for me personally. But like I said, I can totally understand why this is a type of movie that has a very divisive response. This is one of those movies where I can understand people loving to death because of how creative and how many swings it takes. And I can also understand people on the other side hating this movie because the thing with movies, like, I always say this, I don't have a problem when a movie takes swings, but that doesn't mean it's always going to work for everybody. And this is definitely one of those movies that I can see why it's most divisive of the year so far. Like, I can see the two opposite sides on this. I'm in the middle when it comes to this movie. I think there are things to like about this, but I also think the execution of some of the creative choices they made in this didn't particularly work for me personally. So that's my thoughts on 28 Years Later. Until next time, movie fans.